welcome to my presentation about the role of dark tourism in the field of public history. This presentation will provide a brief introduction to dark tourism as well as a selection of case studies and will culminate with some discussion prompts. So what is dark tourism? Dark tourism is the travel to visit morbid places which are often sites of atrocities. It became academically recognized as a field of study in the 1990s. However, examples of dark tourism can be found throughout history, such as gladiatorial conquests in ancient Rome or public executions in Britain. Pioneers of the field, John Lennon and Malcolm Foley, distinguished 5 categories of dark tourism, the first one being travel to public enactments of death. As previously mentioned, this is where the roots of dark tourism are, but are now rare in the Western world. The second is travel to see sites of multiple fatalities, for example, Holocaust memorials or disaster sites. This is the most commonly recognized form of dark tourism today and will be covered in my case studies later in this presentation. The third is travel to internment sites or memorials in grave sites. This could be to see war cemeteries or even a celebrity's grave. The fourth is to see symbolic representations of death which are not connected to the event. This is usually through museum visits, perhaps to a military museum. The fifth and final category is travel for reenactments of historical carnage. For example, a battlefield simulation. American Civil War enactments are a popular form of this. So what is the public historian's role? When dark tourism formally emerged in the 1990s, there were worries amongst the media about the commercialization of people's suffering and death. These worries have become especially relevant due to the rise of social media. We can see on this graph that internet searches for tours of different dark tourism sites have risen since the late 2010s and are now rising again since the pandemic. However, public historians and psychologists have struggled to find a singular motivation for this rise. Dr. Sheila Keegan has found that with an increased ease of air travel, there has been a higher demand for a unique type of holiday, rather than the traditional sunny resort. Social media has only exacerbated this effect. Therefore, it is the public historian's role to make sure that dark tourist sites remain respectful to those being commemorated. They are to provoke thoughtful reflection and discussion amongst visitors, rather than their site lost as an Instagram trend. Okay, so now we're going to look at some case studies. First one is Holocaust memorials. They have become a key part of the dark tourism industry within Europe and now serve as an anchor of the German and Eastern European tourism sector. The Auschwitz Memorial has 2 million visitors within its first decade of opening and had a pre-pandemic level of 2.5 million visitors in 1 year. However, it must be noted that many of these visits are not influenced by dark tourism, but are a type of pilgrimage, often with a family history aspect. A challenge that public historians face is that they now have a limited number of survivors to fully recount the tragedies which took place. This is especially important because with the rise of dark tourism, there are more visitors with only a basic knowledge of the Holocaust and may lack first-hand accounts. A benefit of dark tourism is that public history practice is put under scrutiny. It has been recognised that groups such as the disabled and the LGBTQ+ community have continued to be marginalised after the Holocaust. Memorial to homosexuals prosecuted under Nazism was not unveiled until 2008, and the T4 Memorial for the victims of the Nazi euthanasia program took until 2014. This shows that how today's society plays an important role as who is memorialised. A larger number of visitors means that there is greater pressure on public historians to adequately represent victims. Despite this, Germany has been internationally praised for their handling of the Holocaust memorials, and they continue to be some of the most popular sites of dark tourism. Next, we have Japan's most popular dark tourist site, Hiroshima, the site of the world's first nuclear attack. In 2015, which was the 70th anniversary of the Hiroshima nuclear bombing, the Hiroshima Memorial Peace Park and Museum had approximately 1.5 million visitors. In the same year, Japan's National War Memorial, the Yasukuni Shrine, achieved only 300,000. Both of these sites fall into two different categories that Lennon and Foley suggested, Hiroshima being a site of multiple fatalities and the Yasukuni Shrine being a symbolic representation of death. This demonstrates that locations where the actual event took place have a greater pull for dark tourists. However, it should also be recognized that the Hiroshima Memorial Peace Park and Museum contrasts greatly with other Japanese war memorials. The museum originally opened in 1955 but has since been renovated twice and therefore is one of Japan's most modern war memorials. It also contrasts the national narrative of Japan being a victim of war and acknowledges the part that Japan played. This means that the influx of dark tourists coming to Hiroshima benefit from being given a different perspective. This shows that dark tourism can have a positive effect in terms of public education on the historical narrative. The next case study I would like to discuss is the Kigali Genocide Memorial, which opened in 2004 and commemorates the Rwandan genocide which took place a decade earlier. It has close ties with Britain's National Holocaust Centre and sits at a mass graves used to bury the victims. Like previous case studies, the Kigali Genocide Memorial serves to prevent further genocides. They do this by choosing individual testimonies from the genocide which humanizes the victims. The memorial's main purpose is education, and public historians are heavily engaged in community outreach. They enabled the Rwandan genocide to be added to the national curriculum, and the Aegis Trust, who run the memorial, are responsible for educating 2.5 million students every year about the genocide. However, when it comes to Western tourists, it has been found that their narrative of the genocide has been greatly simplified. It portrayed the Tutsi as the only victims and ignored the killings of the Hutu, which took place towards the end of the genocide. Some Rwandan memorials have also been criticized for their willingness to display human remains as well as blood-stained objects. Although these are confronting, it could be argued that this feeds into the fear of turning dark tourism into spectacles. It should be recognized that the efforts are taken to display remains as respectfully as possible, which further humanizes the victims, therefore provoking reflection among visitors. Through the case studies, we have seen challenges that public historians face when representing tragic events. Public historians endeavour to represent those who are no longer with us and show that there is more to their story than the way in which they died. They must also curate exhibits with dark tourism sites that are engaging and thought-provoking but are not spectacles that simplify the narrative of events. Public historians can also use funds generated by dark tourism for community outreach as well as an opportunity to educate tourists. This further promotes the purpose of not allowing events to be repeated. Overall, it is certain that dark tourism is here to stay, and with the rise of social media, could become a more prevalent way of travel. Therefore, it will be a growing part of the public history practice. Public historians must learn to use dark tourism to educate the population about past tragedies. Here are the sources I used to put this presentation together. They will also be linked in the description. So I have some questions to leave you with. Some of these are in two parts. The first one is, what do you think a public historian's priority should be when working in a dark tourist attraction? Have you or would you engage in dark tourism? Why or why not? What role do you think that dark tourism will play in the future of public history? Could it be the main way in which members of the public engage in history? Okay, thank you for listening.